Adrien. This is my live stream that I do every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It's where I like to take the conversation a little bit deeper. This week, we're going to be talking about seeing beyond your thoughts. Now, this is I felt like it was necessary to try to wrap up the last 3 live streams I've done, which have all revolved around this concept of seeing beyond. It has to do with my book, Seeing Beyond, and the perspectives that it lays out in here. The book is all about seeing beyond these limited perspectives that we all share. And I've walked you through the 3 perspectives that I follow in the book, but in a strange way, I kind of want to backtrack, if that makes any sense. I want to talk about the reality of seeing beyond your thoughts, which I'm struggling with right now. So, because I actually got a little bum rushed here. I got a jump start here. I got off track here a little bit. But so, forgive me as I stumble through the beginning. Seeing beyond your thoughts is actually something that was covered in the book for sure. First of all, it's implicit in the whole book. I think we're going to get into that today. But it also is covered in the first perspective of seeing beyond our senses. In the book, I talk about this quite quickly, actually. I think it's in the preface or in the very beginning where I talk about the fact that I'm going to use a 6-sense model instead of the 5 senses that we're used to in the Western world. Now, this has to do, or I take this from Eastern thought, and that has to do with the model that they believe in, which is that we have the 5 senses, obviously the ones we're very familiar with: touch, taste, smell, sound, whatever I've missed, sight. And then we have thought. That's the 6th sense in their model. And I remarked that this is very important, and actually just by including this in the senses, we begin to expand this perspective right away. And that's because thinking is the dominant sense. So the fact that, and maybe that's why we missed it in the Western world, or we put it somewhere else, because it seems it's so dominant that it almost seems like it's something else, right? The example I give in the book, and it's actually part of where I get the cover from, the apple on the cover, I talk about the fact that I try to prove how thought is the dominant sense. Uh-oh, it seems like we got bad internet, honey. Sorry. I try to prove the fact that it's a dominant sense that by talking about if you take an apple and you eat an apple, the experience of eating an apple is a sensory extravaganza, right? Like, you're never going to get more of your senses going at once. Every single one of them is going, from sight and sound and taste and smell and all of it, right? Touching the apple. But if your 6th sense, if your mind isn't involved in that, if it's doing something else, all of that rest, you could eat that whole apple and never realize or never notice a single bite. I'm sure you've all had an experience like that, right? This goes to show very clearly, I think, that thinking is the dominant sense. It's the one that rules us in a way. It's the one that all the rest of the senses kind of get interpreted through. At least this is how we go about living our lives. And this is what we're going to talk about today. What else is there besides your senses? I hate to keep doing technical breaks here, but I got to ask my wife something. Were lights on, lover? Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry. So hopefully we can get this in. Hopefully it's still working. Okay. So what else is there beyond your thoughts? This is a challenging thing to consider, and if you've never really thought about that, or if you've never taken time with a thought like that, it can kind of hit you sideways, because what else is there? Let's be honest, right? We all go about our lives with a conversation constantly going on, right? There's this constant drumming, a hum of thinking. We're thinking about something we just said. We're thinking about something we just did. We're thinking about something that we have to do. We're thinking about something that we want to do. We're thinking about something that we want, something that we don't want. We're thinking about how the whole thing is put together as far as like, what is my day today going to be like, right? This is always going on. Actually, I'm almost making it too important, because sometimes it can be like, I wonder why I like the color red, or I wonder what's going on with my shoes over here. What's that mark on there? It doesn't have to be something really. We're constantly having some sort of rumination, some sort of running of thoughts in our mind. I think this is probably why Descartes came up with this notion of I think, therefore I am, because he looked inside and he thought, the only thing that's constantly happening is this thinking. So therefore, I think, therefore I am. I have a feeling that's probably, I've never read the whole thing, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm some expert on Descartes, but that's the sense I get from it when I hear it, and I certainly have contemplated where he was coming from with that. To think, or to try to understand what's beyond thought, is a very challenging thing, because the truth is we live in that dimension only. Our thoughts run our life. I often talk about the three things that really rule us and that we need to try to see beyond if we're going to expand, if we're going to grow, if we're going to evolve. And I always say it's thoughts, emotions, and desires. They're so completely interlinked, actually. So it's really hard to say there's one or the other, or which one's more important, or because they say an emotion carries 1,000 thoughts, right? I don't know if you can feel that. I think that's so true. But a single thought can trigger an emotion. Can you see that? You see how closely tied that is? And if you have an underlying desire, it can dominate how you think and therefore your emotions completely. Can you see how closely interlocked these three things are? When that's all we are and that's all we understand, it gets very... we're slaves. This is the thing I always say, and it's kind of strong terminology, but I think it's actually very appropriate. If we don't realize there's something more to us than our thoughts, emotions, and desires, then we're a slave to these thoughts, emotions, and desires. This is the thing I often cite when I talk about, the self-improvement movement, right? This whole self-actualization or self-development notion. There's nothing wrong with it. It's wonderful. It's actually important. I think it's a very necessary step. But they never, or very rarely, does anybody in that sort of field realize that they still haven't addressed the issue. I talk about this in the book too, where I say if you're trying to manipulate your thinking, if you're trying to think positive, right? That's kind of the whole, you could almost sum up the whole self-development, self-improvement movement by that, right? Think positive. Very important, very powerful. I know for me, gosh, that was a huge improvement in my life when I started to focus there, because I hadn't even realized how negative my thinking had become. So then I started to work on shifting that, right? Like constantly being aware of the fact that I was doing that, and then trying to maneuver it or manipulate it into positive thinking positive thoughts all the time, and having positive things in my life, and only looking at and focusing on the positive things in my life. And as I say, it was a really big step for me. It was very important. But there came a time where I realized I was a slave to that. I don't want to shatter anyone's dreams, but life isn't always positive. Not in the way that that's trying to be. Hardships come. It doesn't matter how much you train your mind to think positively. There's certain things that happen in life that just don't feel good and aren't meant to feel good. So if you're trying to manipulate those things into being something positive all the time, which you can do, funny enough, right? You can try to find the bright side of everything. And that's not necessarily a negative thing if you can't look at what's painful, if that makes any sense. What hurts. I talked about this a little bit last week when I addressed the fact that, I had lost people I loved very dearly recently. And if I try to only look at the bright side of that, there's some part of that's denying my love for them. Because their form, their physical form is gone, and there's a sadness to that. I'll never see that specific smile again. Now, I talked about how that smile lives within me, and that's true. But that's an ultimate truth. There's still a relative truth that says that form is gone. And if I don't honor that, if I don't feel that pain, somehow I've cheapened that love. This is a very challenging thing, but this is part of starting to understand what is there beyond thought. Seeing beyond thought is not a trick. You're not going to come across it like that. It's actually a quantum leap. Now, I don't know where you are in your life and what interests you, because something like this, what I'm trying to point you to is very, very deep. And if you're not interested at that level, then this is probably not going to interest you. But as I said last week too, I encourage you to don't turn it off too quick. Don't shut yourself off too quick and be like, I don't know, this is a little too much for me, seeing beyond. I'd like the positive thinking. That makes more sense to me. And that's great. If that is where you stand, pursue the positive thinking. Seriously, I couldn't say that enough. But try to make sure that you're considering maybe there's something more. Because this is the core of the issue. If you're ever going to actually experience freedom at this quantum level, you're going to need to realize there's more to you than your thoughts, more to you than your emotions, more to you than your desires. I can't express how much more. It's such a beautiful experience to taste it. What's beyond thought? What's beyond all this conversation going on in your head all the time? Have you ever tasted anything like that? The moment you think about it, it's something else, meaning you're not there anymore. This is the conundrum of meditation, right? Especially as you're trying to quiet your mind, which you start to find, and you're just trying to be present. Maybe it's the first step and a really powerful step to just be aware, be present. But then if you want to say goal, the ultimate goal is to quiet the mind, because once we quiet it, we get a taste of this freedom, of this joy, of this peace. It's just sitting there. It's always present. It's waiting for you to recognize it. But the moment you think about it, you're lagging behind, as I've said, right? Because this thing that I'm talking about is so alive. It's so present that it's constantly in this moment. And any time that you think about this moment, you're lagging behind. You're not all of a sudden there a little. You're not quite there. You can be there with me right now by just listening to me. Just being here with me. Don't try to do anything with it. Just feel where we are right now. This is going to be the totality of who you are, too. Like whatever's going on in your life, that's fine. It's here with you right now. We don't have to obsess about it. We don't have to do anything about it. We can just experience it. There's a feeling inside of you right now that encompasses all of that and then something more. This something more, this presence, this power, this joy, It's a very strange thing. This joy lives beyond circumstance. I do say that a fair amount, especially in my blog. I think I say that more than I have in my live stream here. Joy lives beyond circumstance. It doesn't care what's going on. And that sounds heartless or something. It's not that. It's actually full of heart, right? It's joy, for crying out loud. It's not happiness. It's joy. Even as I found out the news of this loved one, if I got quiet, if I didn't just ruminate, if I didn't just start thinking about it, but if I got quiet and present, I felt the pain and I felt this joy. Part of that pain was this love. That's a taste of the joy, though. If I tell stories about the whole thing, then I get lost. And I lose some of that joy, maybe all of it. I can fall into sorrow. I remember when my father passed away. He passed away at a fairly young age. And it was a beautiful but painful time, right? We knew it was coming. I'm very grateful for that. And so there was this kind of build up to his death. And of course, one day he's gone. As prepared as I was, both spiritually, emotionally, even with my father and all that, there was a deep pain. This was my father. He spent his last days here in my house. He actually passed away in the room next to me here. I remember realizing and feeling, I don't know how to explain this, but I want to share because that if I wasn't careful, there was an abyss to this sorrow. That I could fall into this abyss of sorrow for my father. Now, it was an emotional and mental charge, if that makes any sense, meaning like there's an energetic field to it, right? And if I fed into that field, it would build and build. That's kind of the abyss, right? And it could be something that I could carry that sorrow and sadness with me forever. And at that moment, it could have encompassed me. I could feel it very strongly. Now, because of my spiritual practice, I knew what to do with that, right? I didn't feed into it, but I didn't push it away, right? This is that allowing and letting go, that leaning into and leaning away, the riding the waves thing, right? I had to do that for months. I loved my father. We had challenging times together, which made it even more poignant, you know. We had a beautiful time at the end together, and he was gone in his physical form. What does this have to do with seeing beyond thought? It's a pointer. If I only thought about my father's death, two things would happen. One, the abyss. Or two, I would have made a story about it. I would have turned it into something that I could manage, right? And in my opinion, and in my heart, and in my experience, I would have cheapened it a bit. Instead, I can honestly say now, my father lives within me. One, because I look a lot like him. No. The older I get, the more I look like him. But that's a trivial thing, actually. There's a certain part of him that is very tangible and real for me. And it isn't some story I created. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's why, even though there's still a missing him, there is no sorrow, actually. Seeing beyond thought is a powerful thing to engage with. Whatever level, I want to kind of backtrack here what I was saying, that if this interests you, great. If it doesn't, I still recommend, please spend a little bit of time there, because it's a levels thing or a layers thing, right? The more we dig into this subject, the more nuanced and subtle we realize it is. And the more that we do that, actually, the closer we get to freedom. That's why it's worth doing, because wherever you find yourself, wherever you stop, maybe you might say even, right? You're that much closer. You're that much freer. And it's worth doing for that reason. Freedom I don't want to say freedom isn't about choices at all, but we often just think that freedom is about choice, right? If we have choices, we have freedom. But I've said this before, but it's important because this is part of why realizing that there's more than thought. If you don't realize that, then you're never going to have this freedom, because freedom is responsibility. That's what I usually say, right? And that means it's the ability to respond. If you don't realize there's more to you than your thought, then you're always going to be subject to thought and the things that it creates. There is a limitation there. And without acknowledging that and understanding that, or at least approaching it, you see it, then your ability to respond is going to be limited. Because there's still always this underlying belief that this is who you are, but it's not. It's not at all. That's a really harsh statement in a way, but believe it or not, it's not at all. It's just something happening. There's a million reasons you're thinking the thought that you're thinking right now. You know, there's that whole domino effect, right? That just gone, and so much of that has nothing to do with freedom, if you can feel that. That's why it must be, that's the quantum leap. I don't know if you can see that. That's why there must be something beyond that. Otherwise, you're always subject to that. That's why the positive thinking only works so far. At some place, it breaks down. And that's because it's missing this critical, crucial element. So, to keep it practical, I mean, I've already pointed to it a bit. But I'm hoping, I so want it to be real for you. I so want it. It can't be theoretical. Theoretical is thought, right? This is the funny thing about emotions, and people go there too, right? When we get into emotions, when we get into feeling what I'm saying, now there's a difference between feeling what I'm saying too and emotions, but sometimes emotions, because they do carry 1,000 thoughts all in one, right? Feeling. It can feel like you're closer, and you are in a certain way because of that ability to multitask almost in a way, right? Because it's encompassing more. But again, you're more than that. It's so remarkable. So to feel something is approaching closer to the field of this freedom, right? This field of freedom, you might say. But if you're subject to that emotion, if you believe that emotion is you, then it rules you again. And now you're limited. Now you're run about by your emotions, which, by the way, is what the self-improvement movement is really about, typically. It's chasing feeling good. That's what it's doing. It doesn't realize it for the most part. And of course, feeling good feels better than feeling bad, right? I mean, it's easy to understand why we do it. I'm not judging anyone for it. I'm only trying to point to the fact that it's limited still. That it's only part of the journey. You know, I've talked about this sort of stuff a lot, but I really want to dial in to what is it that's beyond thought. So let me say it as cleanly and precisely as I can. Now, don't forget, I'm using words, so we're thinking still in a way. Now, if we do it quickly, if we just stay in the moment, there's really not any thinking happening. If you're just following me, if you're just listening and being with me right now. What's beyond thought? I'm just going to say it, okay? What's beyond thought? Being. Being. If you're here with me right now, we are. I am, as I said last week. I've said it many times. I am. What does that mean? Feel it with me right now. Don't worry about what does it mean. Actually, just be here with me. What does that feel like to be here with me right now? To be here with me. To be. This is what lies beyond thought. If you did it for even a split second, you might have tasted that certain... It depends now, right? I don't know where you are, what's going on right now, right? But if you are quiet enough, if everything's good enough, you will taste that joy. It could be a peculiar feeling even in a way, because it's like, what is that? It's simplicity in a certain way. There's such a beautiful quote, and I can't do it well, so I shouldn't have even brought it up. But it's Meister Eckhart, and he talks something about the fact that it refers to God. So I don't know if that's a problem for you or not, but exchange it with life or something. This ever-present being that I'm trying to point to, that you are, right, is in everything because it's so simple, because it's so direct, because it's so present. This is how it finds its way into everything. There's more to the quote, but I can't do it justice, so I'm not going to boggle. I think that's enough maybe to taste. Maybe I'll look for it and put it in the in the descriptions after. This simplicity is what we're missing when we think so much, right? Let's go back to what I talked about when we began, in a way, like this conversation that's always going on in our head. It's anything but simple, right? Now, I'm not trying to deny complexity. It exists, obviously, but it exists, strange enough, in this field of being. Life is simpler than we've made it. This is freedom in a certain way. I talked about this in my blog that I released today, that I said that I was talking about habits, and when we're feeling stuck is feeling like we have no choice. Freedom is realizing there is no choice. It's very paradoxical. What do I mean by that? I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. It's kind of fun. I'm not sure if I did this or not, because I talk about this a lot. So I've talked about it with other people, and hopefully I'm not repeating myself. But let's remember too, as I talk about all these things, I've talked about every single one of these things. But repetition is not redundancy. Not if you go there. Stay here with me, go there with me, and you'll realize there's things you've heard me say this before, but you still are missing something. That's why repetition is not redundancy. It's how we learn, right? We're going over it over and again. So what I'm talking about with this freedom is realizing there is no choice, is what I commonly refer to as wood burning stove clarity. I can't even remember what I'm saying. So wood stove burning clarity. Like when the wood stove is hot, you don't touch it, right? Everybody knows that. You don't have to go into deep philosophical thought about whether I should or shouldn't. You don't have to go to counseling to talk about, well, gee, I really have this deep urge to touch this wood-burning stove that I know is hot. We don't have to do these things, right? That's because it's very simple and direct, and we know it's hot. Don't touch it. But it's only when we have that sort of clarity that we actually have a choice. Because if we don't understand that, this is how drinking was for me for a long, long time. Even though I knew it wasn't good for me, I knew it was causing problems, I knew it was a problem, but I was still always lacking some sort of clarity about it that kept me returning. It wasn't until I saw the full picture crystal clarity. That was when I actually have a choice. I had a choice to drink or not to drink. But here's the funny thing. Once you realize that the stove is hot, why would you touch it? You wouldn't, right? There's no choice there. The choice is suffering or joy. Why would you choose suffering? You wouldn't. You just don't realize that that's what you're doing. Even when you think you do, even when I thought that drinking's bad for me, but it does, I enjoy it, but it helps me relax, and there's a million things, right? But I'm addicted. But there was clarity missing. I didn't see the big picture. I didn't see it clearly enough. The moment I did, I was able to choose. Here's the funny thing. Well, I don't know if I should even go there, but there was a vast amount of freedom for me in that specific subject once I saw it clearly enough. If you don't see this thing I'm pointing to you about the fact that there's more to you than thought, that there is something beyond thought. It's very hard to conceive of because we only ever try to use thinking to go there, right? If I say to you, what's beyond thought? You just start thinking about what's beyond thought. Well, that's just more thinking. That's why I say you have to be here with me. I pray to God that you are here with me right now. It's a joyous moment we're sharing right now. It's a beautiful, simple moment. I can slip into thought too, because I could think right now, what am I going to do after this? Ooh, I'm gone. I try not to do that when I'm here talking with you. It's part of why I love this. It really makes me dial into this moment with you. This is beyond thought. Now, how can it be beyond thought, Adrien? You're talking. Try it. Be here with me. You can still talk, you can still think, but you're not owned by the thinking. It's happening in this direct moment. I think we have a question.
So would you say being shapes thought, which shapes feelings, emotions, which shapes behavior? If so, how do you practically practice being?
Very interesting point, right? Okay, this, we're going deep. This is a beautiful question. Thank you for whoever asked it. We're going deep here. I mean, I guess where are you going to go if you start talking about seeing beyond thought, right? So this is what I try to explain in the book, which is the fact that the moment we believe our senses, right, then all of a sudden there's this sensation of separate. This is the steps. I didn't go over them again, and I probably should have, because, just in case you didn't see the other ones or something, right? That's the progression, though. The first perspective was that we believe our senses. And of course, in a certain innocent way, what else would we do? We have this sensory experience. We believe this is who we are. The moment we believe that, we all of a sudden feel separate. The desk is here and I'm over there, or the desk is over there and I'm in here. Then I said, just to follow it through, then I said, once we create this kind of illusion, this is where I'm going to try to address your question. This illusion of separation, fear comes in. All of a sudden, I'm over here, or it's over here and I'm over here, and I'm alone, right? I'm separate. This is the fan blade I talked about too, right? It feels like this is some solid, real thing. And when we get caught into that illusion, which happens very naturally, very innocently, I would have to say it can't be a mistake because we all do it. I know it's not a mistake. It's a very interesting where it brings us. But if we fall into that illusion, the fan blade's moving and it looks like it's one solid thing, even if you stick something in it, right, which is like that feeling of like, this is separate. You stick that in there, it feels like it's one solid mass, right? But you slow the fan blades down, you slow the mind down, and you realize it was just an illusion. Now, pain can be caused from this illusion, right? If I stick my finger in that fan blade, it can hurt. But in the end, in the end, it is that. This is why they call it awakening. We wake up from the dream, as they like to say, especially in Hindu. That's a really common way to, that's their metaphoric talking or speaking of it, right? This is awakening. It's also part of why I say it's not a mistake. We're awakening to our true nature. So I think you did a pretty good job. Now, there, consciousness, it's just there. Then there's this experience of I'm in here. This is the sleep. This is all of a sudden consciousness fell into a dream. And then we get carried away in the dream. Hopefully that makes some sense. If we get carried away in the dream, then it becomes a matter of waking up. This is the spiritual path. This is, by the way, this is the born again experience. This is why it's necessary. Now, you know, 'cause I love religion. I think anybody who's followed me, I love it. I think it's very useful. I think it has very powerful, strong metaphors there that help us understand something once we understand what it is they're pointing to, right? The born again experience is exactly the same thing as waking up. The issue actually typically happens in the Christian tradition and in Christianity in general is a lot of people think it's a one-off event. And I'm not trying to judge. I'm just saying, though, that this born-again experience is something that has to be eternally happening. This is the being. This is the, you know, you're constantly awakening and being born again, if that makes any sense, because this is a new moment, and this is a new moment, and this is a new moment. You see it? So, because now you did an excellent job of talking about being gives birth to, you know, and gives birth to behavior and all that kind of stuff. So certainly what we typically do is we work our way backwards, right? So we start dealing with our behavior. This is part of why the self-improvement, self-development movement is very useful, right? Because that's where it focuses on. It says, gosh, you got some really bad habits. Gosh, you've got some really bad thinking. You've got some really bad behavioral issues, right? This is where psychotherapy can really be useful also, right? Where it says, you know, you feel this way because blah, 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 blah. Very useful. The thing that it starts to lead us back, right? Because when we start to have issues, which I certainly have had, as I think I've already explained pretty, you know, have a drinking issue is pretty far down the rabbit hole of believing in your thoughts and believing in this illusion, right? This is when it gets problematic. That's what I'm trying to point to, right? The further we follow this down, the further we believe in only our thoughts. The more we believe that we are only our thoughts, the more that we'll find ourselves in this very challenging place, right? So then we start dealing with the challenging place that we're in. This is what I'm trying to point to. And we work our way back. If we don't realize that there's more than the thinking, than the circumstance, right? Then because my parents did this to me or because I had this happen to me as a child, these are all relevant to a point, but they will not give us ultimate freedom. What people experience a lot of times, and it's a wonderful experience, I've experienced it too, right, is a relief. Like it gets better. So that's just like, oh, thank God for some relief from the suffering I've been involved in, right? But the core issue is still there. And what will typically happen is we'll find a new problem. I'm betting, again, I don't know who asked the question, but if you've spent time in this sort of development, you found this to be true. You deal with one thing, it's like whack-a-mole, right? It's like, bam, I dealt with my parent problems. Oh, but now I have, compulsion problems. Bam, I've dealt with that, right? Oh, but now I feel, you see what I'm trying to say? And you're chasing this thing, and you're constantly trying to whack it down. But that's because we haven't realized the core issue. So we're working our way back, by the way. That's fine. This is the prodigal son. I did a live stream about that. This is the prodigal son story. The going away and the returning, right? Where we've gone away and we return and we whack this mole. Eventually, though, we need to see this space that I'm pointing to. Excuse me. Gosh, sorry. I think inevitably, and I say I think, but, I try to keep it so I don't feel like I'm saying I know it all or something, right? I truly believe, my experience says, that we are all on this path, whether we're aware of it or not. We're all on this path of whacking moles, so to speak, until we realize, wait a minute, I'm chasing my tail here. What else is there? Here's what happens, by the way. Here's what freedom feels like. Whack-a-mole. A mole comes up. Do I gotta whack it? No, actually, it'll go down on its own and another one pops up. Do I gotta whack that one? No, I don't, because that one will go down and another one will pop up. This is, I've never thought about it quite like this, but this is similar. This is another way of saying riding the waves in a very silly carnival way, right? This is the same thing. This is freedom, though. Do I have to respond to every mole that pops up? No, that's slavery. When you think that you're those moles or that you got to deal with these things that are popping up all the time, that's slavery. Now, that's a certain stage of freedom. Doing, getting life coaching or getting psychotherapy or seeking out a spiritual counselor is very useful for a long period of time, potentially, maybe, whatever that is. That this can be some of the whacking. Some of this is necessary because we need to quiet down. We need to deal with some of these issues before we can get to this deeper level that I'm pointing to. So it's not like that's a waste of time. I hope that's really clear. It's just that there's more. What I often say, too, is if we don't know the direction we're heading, then we're going to end up lost. This is I'm trying to point that this is north, what I'm trying to share with you. Now, you might take a lot of, journeys or side steps or whatever, right, on the way. But as long as you know where north is, you're going to be okay. And you're going to be okay anyways. That's my personal belief. But I'm saying, like, even for the spiritual journey. But you have to know where north is. And north is beyond your thinking, beyond your emotions, and beyond your desires. This is the direction that we want to head because that's where freedom, joy, and peace live. They don't really live in psychotherapy. They will feel that way for a while, like especially if we have some breakthrough and we have some relief, wonderful, important. But it will not lead to ultimate freedom. Not usually, anyways. I shouldn't. There's always an exception. I hope that you are it or whoever, right? But same thing with the self-development, the life coaching, right? Part of this too is until you realize that you are it, that no one can give it to you, that you're not missing anything, that this whole thing is an illusion, that this thing's been sitting here waiting for you the whole time. You're going to be chasing something. This is north. That's all I'm trying to say, really. And it's a powerful direction to head in. It's a useful direction. It's a liberating direction. Just to be clear, because I never want to make it sound like I'm something that I'm not. My moles, whack-a-moles, still pop up all the time. This is how it is for Adrien Fiorucci. What's real with Adrien Fiorucci? This is what's real for Adrien Fiorucci right here as we speak. They pop up. Lots of times, that's it. They pop up, they go down. Freedom. Wonderful. Sometimes I gotta whack it still, right? Especially, I think what happens typically in that situation is it's sticking around, meaning like it's not popping back down. There's something going on. Does that make any sense? Hopefully this is useful. So that means it probably needs a little more of my attention. It's something that I have to work through a little bit. I have to spend some time with. I have to allow and let go. What's there? What's there? That's my question, right? Who am I? I always ask that, and I look at this, and I just sit with it. And I might get into some, I've learned lots of things, right? So I might get into some psychoanalysis about it even. I might get into some spiritual feeling about it. In the end, all that's required of me is to let it go. In the end, that's my job, right? That's where I'll find freedom from it. Whatever I have to do to get there is useful. Does that make sense? This is north again. When I let it go, I realize it's not me. It's just something coming in and out. It was a really long answer. Hope there was some value in there for you. I have a feeling, yes. I just seem to ramble these days. Seeing beyond thought. I hope I actually gave some illumination into what that would mean. Hopefully you tasted it with me a little bit, like just be here. Thoughts are going to come up about that too. What does that mean? I can tell you so many times I've been in meditation and I can go into a very deep, beautiful spiritual place, very quiet, very powerful experience. And then all of a sudden I'll have a thought. Hey, this is it. You got it. This is enlightenment or something like this, right? Remember, how'd you get here? So you can share this with people. Right? This is my thinking. And then for that split second, it's gone in a way. It's not gone, right? Because it's just there waiting. But if I attach myself to that, I can get lost so quick, so random. And that seems like I understand. That's a reasonable thought. Sometimes, I think I might have shared this, but it's fun. This is how meditation really is, right? I can be in that same, very deep, very quiet, very powerful, like just exquisite, right? I had that weird, nasty walnut yesterday. It's so gross. It could be that trivial. All of a sudden, just pops up. This is how the mind works. The mind doesn't care what it thinks about, by the way. This is something else that is important to note. It doesn't care. The more you pay attention, the more you realize. That's why it's just got to stay busy. It creates problems. It loves to create problems because that's something that really can keep it busy, right? Create a problem. Now I got to try to solve it or deal with the problem. It loves that. It feeds on that, right? It doesn't care that much, though, because now it's quiet and I'll just think about a walnut. It doesn't care. It's a funny thing about it. I encourage you to spend time, I say thinking about, right? It's the conundrum. What's beyond thought? Take a look. See. Just be quiet. It's the best way. It doesn't matter. Go take a walk in nature. Just be quiet. What's beyond thought? Just see. Just walk. Just listen. Be with your child. What's beyond thought? Just watch. Just listen. Just watch what happens. Be with your child. What's beyond thought? You're eating a meal. Just eat the meal. Don't try, can't say don't think about it because that almost stirs up some sort of weird desire to think about what you're thinking, right? You see what I mean? No, just be there. Just eat the meal. It'll be a wonderful meal. I guarantee it. If you can just be quiet and eat your food, it's the best food. It doesn't matter what it is either. I thank you so much for your time. It's precious.